Welcome to What Lies Ahead. I'm your host, Chris Ruffini, lead singer of the Long Island band Overthrow. On my podcast, I explore everything related to the hardcore scene through the eyes of artists, promoters, and record labels. As always, please like or subscribe on all social media platforms. John Contino is a renowned designer, illustrator, and creative director, best known as the founder of Contino Studio, where his signature blend of hand-drawn typography and gritty, emotional, charged design has influenced brands and bands alike. With deep roots in hardcore and punk culture, John has lent his talent to some of the most iconic names in heavy music, creating shirt design, art, and album layouts for bands like Incendiary, Indecision, and Sky Came Falling. He also helped reimagine my band's 25th re-release of our album React. His work doesn't just reflect the music, it amplifies its spirit and captures the raw energy that defines the scene. John, thanks for coming on. How's it going, bud?
Thanks for having me, Chris. I'm very excited to talk hardcore today.
Yes, absolutely. And so much to talk about you. Like we were talking before this, and kind of like two different things to talk about with you. So obviously, it's creatively art, what you've built with Contino Studio, which we're for sure going to talk about. But I guess let's start from the beginning with you because I think it all kind of starts with the music, hardcore music. You also play drums for a band. So I guess why don't we start with that? Where what was your first introduction to hardcore? What then led to shows, and then you played. You obviously played for a little.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. It's so funny too because I grew up drawing like since I can remember, and I got really deep into sports as a kid, but then also got like severe anxiety from I don't even know why. It was like one of those things. I probably just like you know puberty and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I kind of stopped playing sports because it wasn't just driving with me. So I started getting into music more. And a friend of mine, I forget what I think the first thing I got a copy of was Newfound Hope 3, that comp.
Oh wow, yes.
Yeah, and it was like there was like Diesel on it and At Odds and Still Life. And to this day, like still one of my favorite comps of all time.
Yeah.
And it was just such a it was so I was always like a new school hardcore guy. Like I always like the heavier stuff with the breakdowns and everything. And um that just had like more of like the metallic stuff before like metalcore was a thing. And I just remember just like listening to those songs and just like loving them. Just absolutely. And then eventually, like I think we got like it was always like my friend Mike Knoll and I. We grew up together, and he was guitarist in my bands too. And one of us would always get like a tape, and I think he showed me like the Earth Crisis All Out War EP. And then my friend Pat, that I also grew up with, his brother Dan plays bass in Overthrow. So like we got the pink demo, I want to say, that you
Oh,
guys did. And I
that one's
remember
rough.
wearing that thing out before I gave it back to him also. And actually, there's a really funny story too. It was like one of my early like shows. I went to Deja One, and I don't know how old I was. I must have been like 14 or 15. Like I don't even think I could drive to get there. And I'm like walking around and I'm like trying to fit in because I was still, like so young and like had no idea what hardcore was and like trying not to get beat up, but also trying not to look like a dork and all those things. And you guys had a merch table set up there. And I recognized the name Overthrow from the demo tape that I got, not knowing what any of that means or like what it meant to like be in a band. Like back then I didn't know that like bands would sit at their own merch tables, because I went to Nassau Coliseum to see bands. Like I
I
didn't
agree with
realize.
you. Yeah.
And I saw Overthrow. I was like, oh, Overthrow, I know these guys. And then I think I forget who it was, but it wasn't you and it wasn't Dan, but it was maybe I don't remember who it was exactly, but someone was like, "Yeah, that's me. That's my band." And I felt so embarrassed because I thought I was like being cool, like, "Yeah, I know this band." He was like, "Yeah, I know. So do I. I'm in that band."
That's funny, man. So that's like the Deja one was a great place.
Oh,
So
it's the
like
best.
you were going to shows a lot then, obviously. So then what
Yeah.
led from there? Did you always play drums or just kind of as you were going like 14, 15 to shows, did you start playing? And then obviously once you start going to shows, you start connecting with more
Right.
people and then it builds from there. But were you
Right.
playing drums at that point in time?
Yeah, I had like kind of like played around with drums off and on from when I was like 5 or 6 because my uncle played drums. So whenever I would go to his house, he had his drum set set up in the basement, and he played like Rush, like
Mm,
that was his thing. So he had double bass like 1,000 toms, like million cymbals. So I would just sit there and just like bash on them. And a few times he would try to teach me how to play, and he'd be like, "These are rudiments, these are paradiddles, blah 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 blah." And I was like, "That's cool, but I want to play double bass. I don't really care about any of that stuff." So he would like try to teach me, and eventually he let me borrow his set, which had like these two big bass drums and everything. And at the time, I was like big into Nirvana, Alice in Chains, Metallica, stuff that was easily accessible. And I would go to like the Wiz and like pick up. I remember picking up like Master of Puppets, and the guy behind the counter was like, "This is the good one."
Still my favorite record from them. That's a
It's
great
so
one.
good.
Yeah.
But then it was just like one of the things that I totally remember was I got Alice in Chains Dirt, and the very first track on that album, it's palm muting the whole way, and I was like, "What is this sound?" And I was like, "I need more of this sound," and that's eventually kind of like led into Metallica. But then I was like, "This is good, but this isn't extreme enough for me." And then I remember a friend of mine showed me Cannibal Corpse and Obituary.
Wow.
And then I was like, whoa, I was like, what is this? So I was always kind of bouncing. So it was like Cannibal Corpse, Obituary, and then it was like Earth Crisis and You Guys, and then eventually like Indecision and VOD, and kind of like these were like kind of like bouncing around these worlds. And um I never really got much into the older stuff because of like the death metal
Yeah.
effect. So like the older stuff, which was like really fast and punky, was always just like too soft for me. Like I
Mhm.
needed it like aggressive and like angry and violent.
Mhm.
And even though like the older stuff was still angry and violent, but like I needed it like thick, you
Mhm.
know?
Mhm.
So I got into that, and then Mike and I, he was learning guitar, and then we were just like, we should play. And then we started playing stuff. And around that time too was like early Corn days too. So I remember like those early Corn days. I want to say it was like 95, 96, something where there wasn't like cheese ball yet. We were just like, this is different. It was like a
Mhm.
weird mix. So we started playing stuff that was like a mix of like Nirvana Bleach, the first Corn record, and then it was like a mix of like Irate and Earth Crisis, and we were just like pulling from the weirdest places. And then we started playing shows. Eventually, we played like Voodoo Lounge and Ground Zero and Castle
Cool.
Heights and stuff like that. And once we started getting into shows, we were just like, oh, we need T-shirts, we need to make a demo, we need to do all this. And then I was like, well, I can draw. I've been drawing forever. So I just started drawing, and then I kind of taught myself like I got a bootleg copy of Photoshop, like Photoshop 2 or 3, like I'm talking mid 90s Photoshop.
Wow. Yeah.
And I started just like teaching myself the stuff, and then just like learning about how to print and how to make things like the right size and all that kind of stuff. And it really was like hand in hand, like learning how to be in a band and learning how to be a professional artist were really like parallel tracks for me.
Mhm. Did you know? So at that time, you're young, you're a kid. So I'm assuming at that point, the Lounge days and Ground Zero and all that, that point you weren't 15. I'm assuming you're close to 20 at that point. I could be wrong.
No, no, dude. I was so what was it like? We started playing there like well, I started going to shows um probably like 96 ish or so.
Mm,
I think
okay.
I was a baby. Um so once yeah, so shit, I was like 13 or 14 at that time.
Yeah, you're a
And
kid.
then once we started playing, it was probably like another year or so after that, like once we were playing. So yeah, like maybe like 15 cuz I couldn't drive, and everything was like just too far. Plus I played drums, so it was like I can't just show up. I need like a whole like
Yeah,
a
I have it easy. It's the best thing
yeah.
for me to sing.
Yeah, like my parents would take me in our station wagon. I remember like
You
uh
needed it, right? With all the drums, of
dude, it
course.
was it's so funny when you see pictures of me like playing drums in the first year to the very last year the last show I ever played was 2006. It went from like a 12-piece kit playing hardcore to like a 4-piece kit playing like metalcore. I
so you
learned.
were so you were playing, and so you're always interested in art,
Yeah.
obviously, and creating. Was this something at that time while you were playing, leading into your early 20s or your 20s, that something that you wanted to pursue as a career? When did it hit you at that point? Is okay, you're doing your music,
Yeah.
but at some point at that. point in time when when you have a band, and I could speak from experience. There comes an end of music with that. Typically,
Yeah.
most bands.
Yeah.
When did it kick off? Like you were doing your shirts for the band. What was like? How did it progress? Like with what you're doing now?
It was kind of like I always wanted to be an artist first and foremost. The music thing kind of came in as a kind of a secondary thing. It was
Mhm.
like there's like a lot of stuff in my life where it's like art was always first, and then something would come into my life and become like a primary identifier of who I was. Like even during like in between my first studio and my second studio, I was running a menswear brand. I didn't know shit about fashion. I just kind like I don't even know how I ended up there. It was just like this is my thing now, and it was like weird stuff like that happens all the time. And there was the same with music, where I was just getting out of sports, and I just needed another outlet. You know, so it was really interesting the way I kind of fell into it and like the way that I kind of saw, I was like, oh, I can be an artist in this way, but I could also use it as kind of like a therapy type of thing.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it was like, it was just this weird thing that, like, there was no real direction to it. It was not like, I want to be a musician forever, or I want to be like anything with that. It was just like, this is a thing that is supplementing kind of my creative outlet. And then once we started, like, I had the first band, Fight to Survive, which kind of lasted until college, and then half the band went away. And then in college, we started a band called The Ambition, and then that band actually picked up steam, and like we released released like a demo, a full length, and an EP. So we got decently far there, but once like we started getting um, like touring opportunities and stuff like that, I was like, I don't know if that's the life I want to lead. I don't know if I want to be
mhm,
in a van, 200 days out of the year. And like, I still love art more than I love being in a band. Like, I didn't want to dedicate myself to that life, where it's just like, where are we going to find food tonight? Like
yeah.
I was just
It's a
like,
lot.
I don't love it that much.
Yeah,
You know what
it's
I
a
mean?
lot. It's a
Yeah.
lot.
Yeah.
So you always art. You always doing art. So
Oh,
it's
yeah,
like,
always. For
do you
sure.
remember? And there could be a few things, right? But
Yeah.
your first job, I guess,
Yeah.
with in terms, I guess, kind of what you're doing now, that was like, wow, okay, I could really build from this from here, kind of thing.
Yeah.
Or you weren't even thinking that. Like, it was just almost like, you're
No.
young, hungry, you're trying to do A, B, and C. You're not thinking that. But like reflection wise, thinking now, like what was something you were like, okay, wow, this is something that I can maybe take off with from here.
There was two things, and I remember them very clearly because at, there was one Christmas, I don't even remember, it was maybe like 10 years ago or so, where I was kind of feeling burnt out, and my dad and my brother were saying to me, they were like, you need a hobby, you know and I was like, I every time I come up with a hobby, I try to make a business out of it. So it's
Mhm.
like so it's like that's been something that was always my way of kind of making something important to me. And I remember is as I was teaching myself this stuff and I was doing, hardcore stuff, there were two projects that I did, and I must have been 12 or 13 when I did them. I did a logo for a neighbor's bagel shop,
Oh
and I
wow.
did a website, and this is early website for my mom worked at a physical therapy office, and they needed a website, and I did the website. It was $400 to do the website, and this is like mid
How old are
90s,
you? How old are you for the websites? 13?
14 maybe.
Which is like at that point, it almost feels like you're rich.
I was a millionaire. I
That's
was a
crazy.
millionaire.
That's a lot of money. It's good money
So
now, think
much
about
money.
it, but that's great money for back then.
I was like, this is it, man. I was like, I get to do this. I don't have to wear a suit. I don't have to go to an office. I don't have to do any
Mm.
of this stuff. I'm like,
And you're
hell yeah,
doing
this
what
is
you
my
love.
life. Yeah. And that was the one where I was like, this is where I'm gonna be. The only curveball was that as I was going through it in high school and I was actually starting to get good, I started doing layouts. It was demos, and then eventually kind of like these like CD releases and stuff. By the time I got to college, I really thought I was headed for like a record label. This like music packaging was going to be my life. And then the iPod came out and kind of killed it. I was starting to make like a couple $1,000s per job, and I was still
Wow.
18, 19, around that time, and I was starting to get good at it. And then the iPod came out, and all those labels who were spending money on layouts started just asking for like 500 by 500 JPEGs to put on the iTunes store or something, you know?
Yeah.
And that
Much
was
like
a
what you
kind
and
of
I
a
are
rude
doing
awakening.
before we jumped on for me and stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which literally that's what we were doing for our new album. Yeah. But like, yeah, so I see that. So it's like you almost had to, you seem like someone, just from knowing you this, you know how to shift and move, and
Yeah.
the fact that you are so creative and you can do different things allows you to do that. And it's kind of cool that think about it, like you did something for a bagel shop when you were 12, 13 years old, and you're like, it sounds like sounds like something you've always wanted to do. I'm not correct if I'm
Yeah,
wrong,
pretty
right?
much.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this like being able to be flexible, I've learned so many times is the most important part about being a creative person, because you could be really, really good at something. And then there's your time where you're really successful. And then what happens? People get bored of it. And then nobody gives a shit about you anymore, unless you know how to take that and change into what is the next big thing, or what is the next big thing after the next big thing, so that you can continue to stay relevant, and you can continue to speak to people in a way that they find, that like resonates with them. So there's really like that whole kind of like adapting to your environment is probably one of the most important things that I would always say a creative person needs to be able to do, and not like changing to meet the trends, but like updating yourself, evolving, so
Mm,
it's like if something's cool, like there's a lot of bands I remember at certain periods in their career where they were like, well, this is popular now, like even like Metallica, for instance, right? We're gonna act like this now.
like
And
load and
everyone sees
reload,
right through it,
like load and reload, right?
Exactly. And everyone sees right through it. They go, this is fake. But then there are bands that evolve, and it's not necessarily hitting the trends, but people appreciate their evolution,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
still love them, you
Right.
know? And that's what you need to be. You need to just be like this. You need to be a creative force in the sense that you're always creating. Because the second you stop creating, you start copying, who cares? You
Yeah.
know?
That actually, it's perfect. Kind of leads into what I wanted to. You like led that in perfectly. What I wanted to talk about. It's like almost like how your relationship with art has changed over time because you have a unique style and an amazing style, and it's you. But there's different things that you do things differently from the sports teams and all that stuff, which we're going to talk about, and some of the grassroots projects that you have, but also from the artwork that you do for albums, like that. You always say it brings you back to your roots when you're doing that.
Yeah.
So how do you feel like that? Like in terms of it's not a conscious thing, but do you do things where it's like almost not research, but you look at things to help kind of build that kind of change or adjustment in terms of what you do with the art, or it's a natural kind of thing you feel?
Well, it's kind
Just
of
experience, actually, because
yeah,
you have a
no,
lot of it.
it's a combination of the two, right? So it's like depending on the project, obviously you have to be well educated on what the project is, right? So it's like if you like I worked on the movie The Book of Life, with 20th Century Fox and Jorge Gutierrez, and he's a Mexican director. And one of the things I knew I had to get right was not botching the Mexican culture part of it, right?
Mm,
Like you can't come
yeah,
in and do this and then it's just wrong, because everyone who has Mexican heritage is going to be like, this is fake. Like this doesn't speak to me at all. This is like some like Walmart version of whatever like whatever he's trying to put into it. And then the same goes for like when I work with the White Sox too. Like a lot of the stuff I do with the White Sox has to feel like Chicago. And I'm not from Chicago, but it needs to feel like it's coming from Chicago. So it's like the education part is number one. The second part is using life experience to kind of translate what that means. So I didn't grow up Mexican, but I grew up Italian and Italian Catholic, which in all my friends that are Mexican or that have Mexican heritage are very similar. So I'm like, all right, so it's like it's this version of family that goes into this, and it's at the depth. But then it's like, okay, but what are the nuances that are different that make us unique? So learning the nuances makes a big difference. And like with the White Sox too, it's like, okay, what can I compare South Side Chicago to? Right. And then you think about like, okay, well, I used to hang out in this neighborhood and I used to do this. And it's like this felt like the underdog version compared to the Cubs, right? So what is the underdog thing that I felt like I experienced? So a lot of times taking life experience and then kind of putting it through the lens of who you're working with really helps to keep the authenticity, but also keep that like emotional connection with
Mhm.
people, because that's the thing that really ties you into it, right? Like everything you love has an emotional connection to it. You can't name something that you're obsessed with that you're not emotionally tied to. So if
True.
you're gonna do something like that, you need to make sure that, like the heartstrings are being pulled on it and it makes sense. Otherwise, it's just like, it's just a thing, you know?
Right. Right. So clearly you do a lot of research, and you have to, because you're
Yeah.
right. It's important in order to do that. And as you're speaking about it, it makes complete sense. So getting into kind of, it's like you talk about, there's a lot of sports teams, there's big brands, movies,
Yeah.
grassroots project. I mean, there's so much you have your hands in. Is it just you? Or do you, because this stuff that you're doing is so big, that you do need help with certain like things and people and bringing people in? Like, how does that work? Does it depend on the project? How do you go about that? Like, do you
It,
have a crew of people to work with?
it started as just me. And then in my first studio, I started working with one of my best friends, Matt Gordon, and he played guitar in Antarabe. And
Oh,
we kind of started a studio for a little while together, and then we did the menswear company together. And then that kind of, through a series of unfortunate events like Sandy and blah 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 blah, like a ton of stories for a different podcast, basically ended that whole thing. So then I kind of went out on my own again and then started the studio. So I went from freelance back to studio. And even this version of the studio, there's let me see, I always have to count the amount of people that we work with, but one, two, three, four, five, six plus me. So there's six plus
mm.
me. So there's seven. I still lead creative and do majority of the creative, but like on certain projects, I can't do everything. So I'll have
Of
a
course.
designer working on, this part of the campaign and a designer kind of like fleshing this part out. But I try to do as much of it as I possibly can. Um, and there'll be some projects like the Buccaneers, for example, when I work with them, a lot of that was like almost entirely solo. So
Mm.
like I've definitely made it a habit of doing the work of like 10 people, which for better or worse has become part of who I am. Um,
It seems like, sorry, you enjoy it. It seems like you, and I don't mean it like questioning. I mean it like, it seems like you enjoy it. Like you
I
enjoy the
do.
rush and doing it, right?
I do. I love the pressure of it. Like I'm
Yeah.
very much of like a get me off the bench in the bottom of the ninth, down by three type of person, you know? So I prefer that, and I feel like I work better that way. Whenever there's like a cushion, I'm just like, there's no fire to make something happen when you're just like, oh, we have 6 months to do this. And just, that's like, I mean, we were talking about it before. It's just like, I sit here and I just like think about a million ideas. I'm like, I don't know, like this is fine, I guess. This is fine, but there's nothing to just make me make a decision. And a lot of times when you are up against the wall and you have to make a decision, and it's like it needs to be good and it needs to be fast, that's where I really feel like the best part of me comes out. So I I probably should learn how to not do that for my own health, but it's where I feel most comfortable, ironically.
It's who you are, and it's what made you successful. Even something as small as quickly as like our cover for our new album.
Right.
Like, we were talking at the VOD show, and it's like the thought you were putting into it. Like, we sent you ideas, but you really think about every little thing that you do, and it's not a little thing. You make it a big thing. Like, and I think what makes it so great for you. So,
That's one of those things too, where one of my designers, who's become kind of like my head designer at the studio now, we always talk about this thing, how it's like concept is so important. It's almost like execution doesn't matter. If the concept comes across and people understand the concept, it doesn't even matter what it looks like. It's just, are you communicating that message?
yeah.
And I always try to explain it to like clients and and people that I work with, where it's like the concept is a rope in a cave, right? So it's like the rope leads you out of the cave, and the cave is just kind of like the creative process. it's dark and there's all sorts of weird shit around you, and you can easily let go of the rope and just be distracted, and then you get lost, and then there's nothing. But if you hold on to the rope and you just keep looking around, by the time you get out of the cave and you've kind of followed the path, you've you've like soaked up so much wild shit in the process. But it's always about the path out.
Mm.
So as you're following the path, you're sponging up all of this stuff, and by the time you get out, it's like you're so rich with experience and style and stories and everything, so that when you actually want to communicate something, you can make a very simple decision like, hey, let's make the record cover red. But then there's a whole reason. It's like, oh, well, I saw that red thing in the cave and it was attached to
Mm.
this and this. So it gives you this opening where you can consistently just take that one piece and then grow off of it. And it feels natural and organic. It doesn't feel like you're just tacking shit on. It feels like it's part of the story. So there's like, over time, I've developed all these, metaphors for what the creative process is to try and explain like this like intuition of experience and failure and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's a huge part of it, just like thinking about what the process is and why the concept is so important to having people latch onto your message.
Yeah, and I could speak to that experience from when we were, I guess, say working with you with the React, when you reimagined React, and when we did that with you, like you gave us ideas with stuff, and we were like, I remember at one point, me and Salerno, and then like Anthony Race, were like, let's just let him run with it, and then you
Yeah.
you just destroyed it. It was awesome. But that's a piece too. It's another piece I want to talk about what you do here. So it's like you're obviously super super creative, but somebody could be listening to this that is similar kind of path that they're looking and doing stuff like that. But it's not only the creative piece, you have to also be entrepreneurial, you have to have a
Mm.
business end to it.
Yeah.
Talk about that side of it, right? Because you also have connected with you're working with major sports. You mentioned the White Sox, you mentioned Tampa Bay, I believe there was the New York Giants. There was all these different, and there could be some I'm missing here, movies like
Yeah.
there's big time businesses you're dealing with here, and that's what these teams are. So how did that come about? Is it just you learned as you went with it? And you're now just super, you're comfortable with knowing what you're doing in terms of conversation. You probably have, so how did like that kind of blending the two of creative and the business end kind of go together?
Dude, it's the best thing. And it's probably I love that I grew up in the hardcore scene because it's everything that leads my life today comes from what I learned in hardcore. So
Mm.
I was talking to Mo from Cypher the other day, and he's doing great stuff right now too, and it was really cool to catch up. But I was telling him that I booked a show one time where it was like, God, it was a ton of bands at Ground Zero, my band, and then Sky Came Falling and Cypher were the headliners. And
Mm.
the show was so long. I think it might have been Shattered Realms' first New York show also.
Oh.
And I remember Shattered Realms showed up and they looked inside Ground Zero and they were like, yo, it's insane in there. And I was like, yeah, I was like, it's gonna be a sick show. By the time we got to Cypher and Sky Came Falling, we got kicked out of Ground Zero and they didn't even get to play. So I remember it was like
Oh.
collecting money and all this stuff. And then I had to deal with the guys, and I was like, "You guys can't play. I'm so sorry, but like, here's some money. I hope you're not mad at me." But and at this time, I'm like 16, 17 years old or something like that, just like learning how to manage, like the success and the failure at the same time. And a lot of it was just like, even going back to like booking shows to begin with, it was like, I don't know how to get my band on a show, but I know how to ask if I can put on a show. So like I went and I remember Crazy Mary at Ground Zero. I was like, hey, can I put on a show here? She was like, yeah, just pick a date. And I was like, I don't know, how about like this date, right? And then I had to find some bands. So obviously my band. And then I had a couple of friends' bands, and I was like, okay, who's the biggest version of a band that I can have as like a headliner for this show? And then I would, find someone who was like, it was usually Diesel at the time because they were the nicest and we went to high school together. So I was like, Diesel, can you guys headline? Like that kind of thing. So it was, we would get 20 or 30 people plus bands or whatever. So it would feel like something. It's like, okay, you start to get a hang of it. And then it was a matter of like selling merch and all these things. Like money was always such a big part of hardcore. And it's like, how do you fund this? Or how do you pay for this? And it's like, even getting t-shirts, it was always like what screen printing shop would do 100 t-shirts for $400. That was always like the deal. I remember it was like, all right, we can get a front and a back, and where are you going to print it, like all those things.
Mhm.
What can we do to make it the coolest t-shirt for the cheapest amount? And there's so many mistakes that happen along the way that by the time I got to college, I had learned how to negotiate for myself when it came to like designing record layouts. And then by the time I got out of college and I started doing freelance work for people that weren't music based, um, I already had a good sense of like how to take care of myself financially, right? Like at least enough to get by. But then like I didn't work at an agency. I didn't do any of that. I was always independent since day one. Like who I am right now is no different in terms of like a business sense than who I was in high school. So it was always just kind of find ways to get your foot in the door. Like I remember it was I think it was uh Jimmy Denome from Next to Last. I became friends with him at a Ground Zero show one day, and he was like, "Yo, I know Reek from New Jersey Bloodline. He could hook you up with this guy." And he could, so it was like, okay, this guy knows this guy, and this guy knows this guy. I can get a show with these people if this one says this, but I have to do a favor for him so that his band, so it was like all these kinds of like, can you name drop this guy? Can you name drop that one? And then we can get on here, and then I'll introduce myself to this one, and then hopefully we'll be cool, and then we can do the next thing. So there was like a lot of that. And getting into the business was no different. It was just a matter of like, what's the next stepping stone? Like, how do I get into sports? Getting into sports was crazy because I wanted to get into sports and I couldn't figure it out. And then I did like a design conference that had someone, um, I think it was a creative director of the Astros, unfortunately, was just like, "Hey, we're doing this, we're doing this design conference. Do you want to come speak at it?" So I was like, hell yeah. And it was a sports only design conference. So I went there and I mean, I came up with as much shit as I could possibly come up with, not knowing who the audience was. And my presentation was like dense. I had so many ideas and so much this and that and the other thing. But then I met like creative directors from this team, that team, blah, 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 blah. And then
Networking.
eventually, became friends with this one and that one. And that's, that's how the White Sox happened. And there's all sorts of stuff like that. And then eventually one project gets out there and then people will see it and they'll be like, oh, I saw what you did with this team. Can you do it with our team? And then, it's all word of mouth. But I always complain that it's like instead of like the whole like work smarter not harder, just
Mhm.
like it doesn't apply to me because like every day of the week I'll always just run headfirst into a brick wall until I break through, and it's just kind of like the only way I know how. And I'm in my 40s now. I'm trying to learn the smarter part of it. But even like going back into hardcore is always just like you know, uh, the only way I knew how to get through things was to just be harder at it, just go
Yeah.
faster, just go, and I would get there, but it's exhausting and it's not a great way to do it, but if it gets you where you need to go, right? I don't know.
But it clearly has, and now it's like now if you're a lot, more experienced with everything. But think about it, it's like it's back to basics almost. It's like
Yeah.
working, working hard, right?
Yeah.
And that kind
Yeah.
of led to everything. And from there, networking, meeting people. And you've always been, you always love talking to people, meeting people, So that part was easy, and then it just kind of worked itself out to look where you're at now. Has there ever been any? And I want to get into the presentations next because you led right into that, which is perfectly.
Yeah.
But where like you have so much on your plate that you're like something has come along without naming it that you're like, oh my God, I would love to do this, but even like I'm not, I'm just, it's not going to happen because of the deadline of when it's done. Has that ever like
No,
occurred? Do you know what I mean?
no, never,
No,
never.
you make it
I
work.
never, I never turned down an opportunity ever.
And again, I could speak from experience for you with that. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not calling what you're doing for us an opportunity. You're doing us a favor, but like that's what that is. And we appreciate that. But even for something like that, you've been super busy.
Yeah.
But you find a way all the time.
Well, it's also funny too, right? Because it's like we're a few years apart, right? But when you're in high school, and I
Oh,
was
it
saying
seems
this,
like, yeah, it's like
you know what
night
I
and day.
mean?
Of course.
It's like I talked to Mo and Cypher about this, to Tom from Indecision. We talk about this stuff all the time, where it's like I would see you guys play, and I'm like, look at these grown-ups, you know? But you guys are like 19, and I was like 14, you know?
Agreed. Agreed.
Right. And it was like to this day, it's still like the coolest thing that I can not only have access to my favorite bands, but also like become friends with my favorite bands.
Mhm.
Like I remember the first time I met Tom from Indecision, like I was like, oh holy shit, it's Tom. I can't believe it. And he's like, oh, I love your stuff, blah blah blah. And he's like talking to me like that, and I'm like, this is so cool. I can't believe I'm talking to Tom. It's like shit like that where it's like that band was so big when I was a kid and
Yes.
so impactful that I they were to me, they were on the same level as Nirvana and Metallica
Yeah.
and all that, and it didn't make sense to me. Like, you guys were there, Sky Came Falling was there. The fact that, like, we've become friends over the years is just the weirdest thing to me because it's like, these were my favorite bands. Like, when I was a kid and they were like aunts and uncles or cousins and like, "Oh, what bands do you like?" And I would be like, "Overthrow and VOD," and but they're like, "What the hell is that?" You know? What do you mean, what the hell is that? These are the biggest bands around.
Uh, that's true. That's so it's so right. It's true. Like when I remember too when you were saying like when I was a teenager going to shows and like the older guys like Dean and Nora Deeming and like
Yeah,
Fahrenheit and now just friends with those guys and like I'm friends
yeah,
with Dean and talk. It's like but when I was younger they were like they were like these adults like to me.
yeah,
So it's so true, so true.
yeah, yeah,
Um, let's talk your presentations a little bit because you had a big one just I want to say a month ago. You always have a lot, but
yeah, yeah.
is that something? Let me see how does it come about where you get offered them to do them? Is it where it's a right fit to do it? It's almost a little piece of you probably giving back a little bit to your field. Do you have them set where you do them? Like, how does it go about? Is it a combo of all that?
Yeah, for a while I was doing a lot of them because it's the same thing as being in a band, right? Like if you don't tour, how is anyone supposed to know you?
Mm,
So it was kind of one of those things where it was like as I was making my way through this career, I started getting asked to do these lectures or doing like a keynote at a conference or something like that, and I I felt very comfortable on stage because I played in hardcore bands. Like it's not going to be any scarier than that,
you're right.
Like
You're
that's
100% right.
right.
Mhm.
Because if you bomb out as a hardcore band, it's embarrassing. If you're doing well as a hardcore band, it's dangerous. Like there's all these things that kind of go into being on stage when you're in a hardcore band. That being on stage for a design conference is so like I could be sitting on the couch watching TV. It's more like you know what I mean? It's scarier
Yeah.
than that. So it's like part of it was like, okay, I'll get out there and kind of share my story because I always felt like my vision and my personality and where I came from was a lot different than who you would see doing these things. There's very like graphic designery types, and I always felt that coming from the hardcore scene, like you get called out on your bullshit. But
Oh
there's
yeah.
a lot, but like in the design community, there's a lot of people who are very pretentious and very, like there's like the art snobby types.
Mhm.
And I'm like, that ain't me. Like, I'm not judging anybody, and I'm not, I believe everyone has a right to exist in whatever way that they feel like. But like when you start putting on a costume and a show for like what you think you're supposed to be, I'm just like, I can't. I can't be a part of that.
Mhm.
Like
Mhm.
part of what I loved about hardcore was that if you were a misfit or a weirdo, go to a hardcore show and you'll find somebody to be friends with. Right. And that was kind of a lot of it. Like I was dealing with heavy anxiety. I was dealing with like all sorts of like personal things. I went to a hardcore show, nobody cared. And then there
Yeah.
was still an opportunity to go out there and get this aggression and get this nervousness out. And it was great because it felt like you could just like be whoever. And there was this kind of like built-in community that just it was like the weirder the pieces, the better the group.
Mhm.
And that felt really cool. So like when I would go to some of these things and it was like cookie cutter, design person, and they all kind of like looked the same and dressed the same, I just felt like I didn't belong there. But then at that point, I liked not belonging there because it also, like, if they were offering me a place on the stage and I didn't belong there, I was going to do things that people didn't expect. So early on, I would go on stage. Like a lot of designers would have a presentation where it would be like a slideshow, and they would show, I worked on this and I worked on this, and the client felt like this. I would go up there with no slides and I would just tell stories off the top of my head. And it
Mm,
would just be random shit. And no one would, no one, everybody would be like, are you going to show anything? I'd be like, no, not going to show anything. I'd put like one graphic on the screen and just start talking. And then there
mhm,
was like, oh, I would always try to come up with ways to like do it differently where I'm not showing a portfolio. I'm like trying to like, tell a story about something that I believe in, or talk about failure, or talk about, like mental health, or things that like everyone deals with, but it's not like an everyday thing. And then also, I would always put like hardcore Easter eggs. So like if you
mhm.
knew, you knew type of thing. Like I
That's
did,
cool.
I spoke at one design conference for sports, and the presentation was called "Destroy the Machines." Like
Okay.
I was throwing it all, and there was
Had to
one
be one
dude.
person in there that knew what you were talking about,
There
especially
was. So
especially for them, right?
it was the sound guy. And after I was done, I kind of went backstage, and the sound guy had like all his cases set up, and he had like an incendiary sticker on there and blah blah.
Oh, okay.
He
So
was
he
like,
knew.
he was like, dude, he was like, I caught that. Don't think I didn't catch that. And I
That's
was like,
awesome.
glad somebody did.
So that's it. So you do a lot of that. It's almost like your way to, it's smart because it's promotional for you, but also your way to speak about your experiences and
Mhm.
talk about things, which is great. So kind of leading in, you were talking about the bands a little. Let's talk a little bit about that. So obviously, I know you connected with the bands, you knew all of them, but how does like some of that? How did it come about? Because I probably the same way it came about for us, but like we want Contino to do this if he would do it. So
Yeah.
like, but how, you connected with some of these bands, and how does it work out? Like you've done album covers, you've done shirts, you've done logos, you've done all that
Yeah.
kind of stuff. So, like, do you use the probably same process with it, right? Like you were describing before when you're doing something like with the White Sox, like you're thinking of the
Yeah.
South Side of Chicago, you're thinking of all these different kind of things. How did that like you do that when you in terms of you're creating something? I think you just created was it Sky Came Falling? You just did their shirts for their return that they've been playing for a little bit.
Yep.
Like the background of that stuff. Did the band tell you what they're thinking, or then you just kind of then run with it and be like, here's what I have, and then it gets adjusted?
Well, it was really interesting too because it was like when I was deep in music packaging, when I was doing a lot of hardcore stuff. I remember the one of the last major ones that I was trying to do was the full length or full blown chaos when they were coming out on Stillborn. And I remember like talking to those guys because I would play with those guys a lot at like
I
Castle
remember
Heights
that
and
one.
stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was
Mhm.
so good. And
Yeah.
I wanted to do the layout for it. And I was also working with the Black Dahlia Murder at the time,
Mhm.
and I did like their website and stuff, but like I was trying to get into doing the packaging for these bands because like I know these guys and these guys are blowing up, and I want to be able to, do something that's gonna like have a little bit of a budget, but also have be seen by people. And I remember it was just kind of like, it was like, oh, well, Jamie wants to use one of his guys instead. So I was like, all right, I'm not going to, I figured full blown I would be able to get because I was friendly with those dudes. But, they're on a label has, they're putting the money into it. And it's, Jamie, whatever, like had his idea, get it. Right. Black Dahlia Murder, same type of thing. They signed to like Metal Blade or something like that.
Mhm.
They had their own thing, whatever. So by that point, after I think we did our last EP in like 2006, and I went all out for our last EP because at that point I'm like full blown professional, know all the tricks. I'm like ordering special paper, I'm doing all this extra stuff. So that was kind of like the last big one that I did. And then when I had my first daughter, Justin from Closed Casket reached out and he's like, I got this incendiary LP coming out. I would love it if you did the artwork for it. I think you know those guys. And I was like, oh, yeah, I know those dudes. That'd be great. So that's when I did Cost of Living for them.
Yeah.
And at that point, I
Great
already
cover.
kind of had like oh, thanks. I had
Mhm.
like an established style already. So like it was, that's like you talking 2012. So I had already
Yeah.
been
Yeah.
working a long time at that point, and that was already like working with big companies, and I used to do a ton of shit with Nike and all that kind of stuff. So that was like a really easy way to just slot in. Not like I liked Incendiary. Like I saw Incendiary play in a backyard in Huntington, like when there was like two original members or whatever,
Mhm.
and they were cool. Like I knew those guys from shows and stuff, and I was like, "Oh, this band's really good. I like them. I wish them well." And then when that LP came out, like I was kind of outside of the scene for a couple of years
Yeah.
because trying to start a career, trying to like buy a house, trying to start a family, just doing grown up shit, you know. And Justin gave me kind of like what the band was looking for, and I designed it, and I hit that little like that little coffin design product in New York on the back of the album sleeve. Didn't mean anything to me. It was just shit that I would always draw, and the way that I laid it out. And they were a massive success because they're awesome, obviously. And it started to come back around, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. You saw that record? That's, because I'm thinking still like a Long Island band, and I'm like disconnected from the scene. And when I left the scene, Long Island was in a really low point, like mid 2000s. There was like not much going on. And like metalcore was like at the end of its, life. And like hardcore was starting to come back. But like I was already like deep into the metalcore version of hardcore at that point, that like everything that, was hardcore I just like didn't even know because I wasn't even going to those shows. Like I was full blown like between the buried and me at that point. Like I had already transitioned into that. So it was almost like the scene was like splintered, and I didn't know what the hell was going on. And then I ended up they did a split with Suburban Scum, and I did that also, and that was like a quick one. And then Justin would hit me up. He's like, "Hey, you want to do this real quick? You want to do that real quick?" And all of a sudden, I start kind of like paying attention a little bit, and it wasn't until years later that people were just like the product in New York coffin design. Someone described, I know sounds so stupid and shitty, but like someone was like, that's like a new age, like Black Flag type of thing. Like it's that recognizable.
It is.
And
I have a
and I
sweatshirt
was
with it. I mean, that thing is, it's everywhere now. Look at, right? Like, to your
It
point,
really is. And I'll
everywhere.
take it. I'll take it. Like I know it's like that's like saying like it's the same thing as the I Heart NY. Like obviously it's not. But it's the fact that it has at least that amount of recognition, and it's tied to a great band, and a great band from where I'm from and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff was unbelievable. And it took me from like me really trying to get my claws into hardcore band design into like all of a sudden I was at the top. And I was like, holy shit, like I'm just like there. And it's like I didn't think about kind of using my powers for good, basically, like everything that I learned in this industry, and then like kind of going back to hardcore and being able to do that. I didn't I just felt like I was gone for a couple of years, so who cares about me? And
Mhm.
then being able to do that, and people caring about it, and then people liking it, and then having the like having Tom reach out and being like, hey, can you do an Indecision t-shirt? I actually I did an interview with Playboy, like anyone read
That's
it, right? So I did an interview with Playboy, and they were like, what's because this is when I was doing a lot of like high profile stuff where a lot of times these companies would feature me as like the artist that did this. Like now I'm much more behind the scenes as like creative director, so I don't do that as much. But there was a point in time where that was a big thing. And so I would get featured in stuff like I did Sports Illustrated swimsuit issue, and there's a picture of me in that, like the least interesting picture in the whole thing, right? But it says like designed by artist John Contino of New
amazing.
York, blah blah blah. So they asked me, they were like, what is the most meaningful, or what's your favorite project that you've ever done so far? And they're like expecting me to be like this movie that I worked on, and this sport. And I was like, I got to design a t-shirt for Indecision.
Yeah. And look,
And
I can
like,
talk about that band, right? Like they
yeah.
were, yeah.
And it was like they didn't know what the fuck I was talking about, but I was like, that was the
That's
greatest
cool.
thing. And through that, I think it kind of brought me back into it a little bit more. And then little by little, it's just like, oh, can like I did like that Fireburn record with Closed Casket. And then like a little bit here, a little bit there. And then all of a sudden, Chris from Sky Came Falling hit me up. He was like, hey, we're doing it. And then it was just like, it became this snowball effect where it was like, I would love to be able to give back to the scene,
Yeah.
and it's just like, I don't even care if anyone cares. I just want to be involved, so give me a poster, give me a t-shirt, give me a record layout or whatever. It's for all these bands that I've always loved, and newer bands that I've grown to love, so it's like it's such a cool thing to be able to, you know go go into the scene that I've been in for, 20 plus years and feel like I kind of evolved from like just a dumb kid, losing his shoe in the pit to like, like someone who like knows everybody, is friends with everyone, has history, is like can talk about the artwork, can talk about the records, can talk about the shows, and just like it's such a cool timeline that it's like it's the most meaningful thing to me. And it's like if anyone's like, what's a dream project? Like I would say to do an overthrow record, to do an indecision record, to do a Sky King Falling record. Like those are the things that are. It's not like to do the branding for Gap. It's like it's still corporate, blah blah blah, whatever. They're
Mhm.
all the same, but this should actually mean something to people, and I
That's
love
cool.
that I can be a part of that in a significant way, the way I've always wanted to be.
Yep, and you are for sure. And one thing, it's like that casket logo, I guess we'll call it, is
Hmm.
well known because when you throw that on a sweatshirt, you don't even put the name of the band on it, and everybody knows who that band
Yeah,
is.
yeah, yeah. You're
That's
right. It doesn't even
pretty
say
damn cool.
incendiary on it.
Yeah,
You're right.
it's pretty cool because that's an awesome like logo cast. It's super cool. And it goes it just goes hand in hand with incendiary to me. And then you have
Yeah,
the others, and then the other stuff that you did was amazing as well. But we kind of like we talked, even the way you're describing things, I would give it as advice if someone's listening to this.
mhm,
But there's younger designers now out there because it's different from when you started, right?
yeah,
The business
yeah,
has changed. You've even seen it within the 20 plus years you've been doing it.
yeah.
What advice would you give to younger designers trying to break into this? Whether it's music, whether it's albums, whether it's or just doing what you're doing, because you got your hand in a lot of different things. So, what's some advice
Yeah.
would you give some young designers out there?
I think at the end of the day, the main piece of advice always stays the same, right? Like it's always like people are worried about AI now, right? When I was coming up, people were worried about Photoshop because they were like, well, Photoshop's going to do everything that we did. We can't do hand typesetting anymore. That removes that. It removes certain parts of the printer's job. It removes, like, you're eliminating jobs. And people are worried that AI is going to do that too. So there's always going to be, I think, something that happens every, 15 or 20 years that's going to terrify the world. And they're going to be like, well, I'm not going to be able to work because this new technology came out. So there's always going to be that. And then there's always going to be style changes. So it's like, yeah, your style is always going to change. It might not always be someone's favorite thing. So there's always that. But at the end of the day, the thing that always stays the same is what part of you is out there in the world. So it's like, we even talked about this with Overthrow, right? Like, where it's just like, who are the bands who are the bands when you were a kid that hit and that didn't? It's the bands that got their shit out there. You don't need a label to get your shit out there. You just need to get it out there. And it's the same with any creative project. Like if you're just like, man, I wish I could do, like in my world, the branding for this company or this company, but I can't get that job because nobody knows me. Don't do it. Do a different thing. Do a fake project. Do a whatever. Do a self-initiated project. Put it out there, share it, and just like hammer people with it, whether it's social media or whatever, like whatever you have that is your own creative thing, you just got to put it out there. Self-funded, however you DIY the shit out of that thing.
Mhm.
Like if you got to find way, if you're broke as hell, find a way to make it happen and then get it out there. You can always find a way. If you're creative enough, you'll find a way to put yourself out there. And the more you do that, you'll notice this person notices, and then like, all of a sudden you got 50 people emailing you or DMing you or whatever, and then it's 100, and then it's 1,000, and then it's 20,000, and all of a sudden you're where you want to be. So it's like it's that kind of self promotion, but like self initiated creativity where you're just like, this is what I do, this is what I think I'm good at, and this is what I want to share with the world. So it's like whether it's putting out a demo, your own demo, and learning how to record it or whatever. Like even my favorite thing too is like when we had our menswear company, it started because we were doing a lot of streetwear brands when like sneaker shops and stuff were big in the early 2000s, and we would design all these t-shirts for them, and our favorite ones would get rejected. So what we did was we had a collection of all these favorite t-shirt designs, and we decided to put them out under our own label. Now at that time, we were broke as hell. Like we were making X amount of dollars per t-shirt design split between the two of us, which is nothing, like you couldn't, it's not enough to live. So we took all these and we were like, okay, how can we make this brand feel unique? And we were bad screen printers. We didn't have enough money to put down for blanks. We didn't have enough money to do labels and tags and all that kind of stuff. So I designed the website. Matt did all the photography, and we screen printed these things in our garage that we rented, and the screen prints were bad, right? So, but we were saying like these are one of a kind, hand printed. So like each shirt is going to be different than the next. You're not going to get two of the same shirt. And then we would get these hang tags and we would dye them. And this is like before this was like a huge thing. We would tea stain them and dye them. And we would stamp them and we would hand write 1 out of 50 or something like that. And we would include it and we would sew tags into it ourselves and do that whole thing. And it gave it an aesthetic and it gave it a value to people who were into that aesthetic. So even though like we had absolutely no resource to do this, we gave it a perceived value that people latched onto. And before you know it, like we were getting emails from celebrities asking if they could wear some of our stuff on the red carpet. We had like one of our T-shirts was in the American Pie wedding movie, but like, but
Oh,
it was so poorly
so-
screen printed by the time that they made it through. The design was like pretty much like faded off entirely. So there was like a lot of stuff like that that happened, but it was all about perceived value, storytelling, narrative, like that whole thing. And we were just like, how do we make this feel like something? So that was, I mean, that's really just the key. It's just like, what's your story? Why is this important? And uh how does it turn into a thing that someone else feels like, yeah, that's for me, you know?
yeah, no, it's great advice with design, with a band, with really anything. With you could run with it. So, what's next for you with what you're doing? You know, you always have something going on. I'm sure you. Sounds like you got stuff booked in the next 5 years. I mean, and because
Yes.
you're always keeping busy because you're working hard and stuff, and people
Yeah.
and there's a demand for what you do. So, what's
Yeah.
some of the stuff that you can talk about that's moving forward here for you?
What can I talk about? It's always a great question because there's like some that like there's I'm currently working with. I think we can talk about this. This is coming out in August. I'm currently working with Brooklyn Brewery to kind of refresh them a little bit. There's a really cool appliance company, which is such a fucking funny thing to say. It's like this appliance company reached out to me when my son was born last year, and they were like, "We want to start something up new, but it has to have like, it's got to appeal to like New Yorkers, and we want it to be different and blah blah blah." And I was like, "This is cool. I never thought about designing a brand for an appliance company. It has been really cool because they're like, yeah, we just whatever you think is the direction for this is what we want to follow." So I've actually come to really enjoy the projects that seem like off the beaten path. Like we're talking to like a furniture
Hmm,
company now too. That's like
hmm.
kind of like a discounty type of furniture company, but they want to reinvent themselves. And it's like that's what I want to do, man. Like I want to reinvent this thing and make it popular, make people really love it. So it's like challenges like that are the ones that I'm really interested in these days. So we've got a few of those kind of coming up that hopefully can become game changers for those businesses. And maybe, they're giving us the opportunity to run wild with it. And I'd love to be able to be, the studio that says, hey, like you can be a business like this and not look like this.
Hmm.
And I would love to be able to be that creative force behind the next XYZ,
Hmm.
So that's what I'm targeting these days is like how do you take something that has one perception and flip it and make people think it's cool.
It's cool, and that's what I think. Why you do so well, why people run to you all the time with these things is you have the same excitement whether you're talking about what you do for us, and then what you're doing for these huge big name brands and stuff. It's like that excitement of like how you can help with facilitate whatever that change might be through your studio, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean we talk about it all the time during the day too, and it's like this is this was my dream, right? To be an artist, to like go to my own studio every single day, work how I want, not how someone tells me to work, do my own thing on my own time, my own way. And I'm lucky enough to be able to have gotten to the point where people value what I say. so I can go into a bigger company or a sports team. It's like multi-billion-dollar organizations, and I can say like, "Don't do that. That's stupid. Do it like this," and people go, "Okay."
Uh, that's super cool. That's awesome, man. So now this part, I'm going to have a bunch of questions, and it's really first thing that comes to mind. But obviously, if there's something you want to elaborate on, you could do that. All right.
Yeah. Okay.
You
Yep.
kind of think answered this, but if there's anything else you could think of too, because you mentioned Indecision, the shirt that you did,
Mhm.
but how about a design or something you created that you're really most proud of? I mean, you could talk the music piece, but then maybe something outside of music as well.
Oh man, most proud of. Well, I had that. I mean, this was really cool because they were like the being able to work on the React and the 1021 record releases kind of back to back
Mhm.
was such a cool thing because those were two records that I listened to so much as a
Mhm.
kid. It was like never left my CD player. So being able to do that like in recent memory was very awesome for me. Like that
Cool.
was I love that. And like they sit on my bookshelf like back there and it was such a cool thing. Um I think from a like a non-hardcore point of view, like being able to get in to the sports world and work on significant campaigns like we did the Giants 100th season
Yeah,
and we did the White Sox 125th season. Like those are essentially once in a lifetime projects, right? Like unless I figure out some way to, stick around a little bit longer, I'm not going to be able to do another 100th season of the Giants or you know what I mean? So having that opportunity to have like milestone projects like that is really cool because that's like leaving an imprint in like the history of the game almost.
absolutely.
Like when people look at it in the future and there's like books about it, like some of that shit's got to be in there, right? Like it's got to show up somewhere along the line. So that's pretty cool.
I was going to say that, like you look back and they have yearbooks or whatever they have, or if you go to MetLife, they're not going to talk about the 103rd season, the
Right.
100th season anniversary. That's a big deal, huge
Right.
deal. So the fact
Right.
that you did something like that, absolutely. I can see why
Yeah.
that would be most proud of. That's cool. So top three most influential albums for you of all time.
Oh man, influential albums. I would probably say In Utero is number one
Go
because
back
it
to
has,
Nirvana, like you said. Yeah.
yeah, it has the perfect blend of weirdo artistry, heaviness, and fuck you.
Hmm.
To it, like because they were following up on like the whole like smells like Teen Spirit of it all, and then they recorded that record. And I remember reading all these things about how the record label was like, this is not radio friendly, this is not that. But I love that album, and it's just like so sick, and it had like it was one of those things that hit me at just the right point in my life
Yeah.
too, where I was like, I love everything about this. It's perfect.
Hmm.
Um, from a hardcore perspective it's so hard because there's all the different little sections of hardcore like indecision was very impactful on me early on because they had a certain amount of nirvana to them in that like they were heavy but they used like a lot of feedback and stuff which I always
Yeah.
really liked and they had such great artwork so that was like a big thing but I also was massive VOD fan, especially from like a crossover kind of perspective where it was like it blended, hardcore metal and grunge. And
Yeah.
that was like a really big thing for me. So like that was like such a that album never left. Like I loved Still, but that the self-titled The Green Drip album, like once they went over there, there's something about that. Maybe because I at the age I was at that I just love it. I still put it on like every single day, and that first like the sound of it, just like it's just a great sound, you
Hmm.
know. And then I don't know, man. I would probably even put two Nirvana albums in there. Honestly, like
Hmm.
I would go Bleach because
Okay.
Bleach
That's a good
was
album. I like that one.
it's so heavy and it's so raw, like it's
Mhm.
such a like it disturbed people made that album. You know what I mean?
Yeah. 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 I was going to ask you, I think I know the answer. So I was going to, one of my questions and was VOD self-titled or imprint. A lot of people love him. Imprint's a really good album too, but it sounds like
Imprint
you're gonna
is,
go Contino.
I went, I was talking to my friend Matt about this a couple of years ago because I went on a VOD binge from start to finish, and there was a couple albums in there like from Bliss to Devastation and stuff like that that I kind of missed out on a little bit. But I was like, I got to give these a re-listen because by the
Yeah.
time Imprint came out, I was already kind of like in like different parts of the hardcore scene, and it almost felt like a little too overproduced for me. And I
Mhm.
was like, oh, they're kind of like mainstream now. They got Phil from Pantera on it. Like it's like
Mhm.
they've transitioned into the next step. I'm underground. Like I was
Mhm.
like in that mindset. But I gave the whole library a listen, dude. There's no fucking weak spots. It's just from the first demo recording to the last song on that last record. It's just excellent.
It's all good,
Fun.
right? Yeah,
Yeah.
they were great at the Paramount the other
They were so
I mean,
they
months.
sounded like they sounded 20 years ago.
They really sounded great.
Yeah. Or
So, Thousand
25 years
Mile
ago, 30
Stare
years
or
ago.
Thousand Mile Stare or Cost of Living?
Um,
The two great ones.
I would probably say Thousand Mile Stare only because I think cost of living, um, I was still I was still kind of disconnected from the band a little bit because
Mm,
I only knew them from like that first demo and seeing them playing that backyard, and that's when I lost touch. So the way cost of living hit everyone else, Primitive Rage and all this kind of stuff with the sing-alongs, I was just like, yeah, like I listened to it 1,000 times when I was designing it, and it kind of like interweaved. It's like
mm,
the memory into like me doing stuff, and
understood.
like inherently, I can't pick what I did as my favorite thing. And when and then when Thousand Mile Stare came out, I was actually working on the branding for UFC 217 or 218. They changed it on me. I forget which one it ended up being. But I was listening to that the whole time, and that I was able to kind of like sink into because they weren't tied together. So like that was what helped me get loose and kind of get in the right mindset to make that project successful. So to me, like I look at Thousand Mile Stare as um, like a catalyst for success. When cost of living, I didn't know what the fuck was going on.
Yeah, both are great. It's hard.
Yeah,
Thousand Mile Stare, I think could be a top five Long Island
so good.
hardcore album of all time. I think it's
Yeah.
that incredible. 1021 or to Forever Embrace the Sun.
If before they remixed and remastered 1021, the answer was easy. It was to Forever Embrace the Sun. I love what they did. When I talked to Chris about 1021, he was like, "We were so unhappy with how that album came out. Like we had to go back and
Yeah.
fix it." And I was like, "Yeah." Like I remember you remember there was a None of the Above records that opened briefly on like Wantagh Avenue,
Yes. Yes.
right?
I was so happy because I was a Nassau County guy. So I was like, I
Yeah.
don't have to drive out east. Yes, I do remember
Right,
that.
right, right, right. So we went there to go get 1021, and I remember putting it on and being so excited because To Forever Embrace the Sun, I loved. And I put it on, I was like, what the fuck is this? I was like, this sounds like someone just like held a mic up in like in the A room while someone was trying to like, I was like, I couldn't figure out what was going on. And I grew to like it more. But then when Chris sent me all the re-recordings and everything, and he was like, this is what it was supposed to sound like, I fell in love with that record, and I was like, this is so good. So like now I'm just like, I like I might listen to the new 1021 over and over more than To Forever Embrace the Sun, but To Forever Embrace the Sun has the songs and the sounds that
Yeah.
were like that China symbol.
Oh
It's,
yeah.
it's
Yeah.
like that. Like I love that sounds.
Yeah. That's a good sound with that, of
Yeah,
course. Hmm.
yeah.
So could have a few of these. That's why I'm gonna plural list. Favorite movies that you have that you're into.
Oh yeah.
Who's
Oh my
go
God.
tos?
There's so oh my God. If you ask me my two favorite movies, it would be Ghostbusters and The Godfather.
Oh, those are two
Yeah.
different. The
Yeah.
original Ghostbusters, not the one that came out with
The original, yeah, 1984
Kate McKinnon.
Ghostbusters
Not that one, right?
and
Not
the
that.
original Godfather. Yeah.
Those are two great movies. Yeah.
So good. So good.
Awesome.
And of course there's like stuff, like there's millions of things I could name drop, but if you had to ask me right off the top of my head, Those two, easily,
Like go-tos you can watch every time, right?
easily, yeah, easily.
Do you prefer streaming or vinyl?
Oh, I prefer vinyl for the artwork and streaming for the fucking ease of listening.
I agree with you. I have here drums with a question mark, but what I mean by that is, this is my last question with this. Do you still play drums?
Funny enough, after that VOD show, the day after, my daughter sings, and she was doing this kind of like School of Rock thing, and I went to go pick her up from it one day, and they were doing "Creep" by Radiohead. So her teacher was playing the guitar and she was singing, and she's so talented. And I'm not just saying that because I'm her dad, but like, I was like, you guys need the drum track on this. So he's like, yeah, I know. I was like, I play drums. I'll sit down and play, like kind of joking. And he's like, go ahead, sit. And I was like, yeah. He was like, yeah, just go ahead. And that was like literally the first time I played drums since 2021, I think. And
Okay.
it's an easy-ish song to play on drums, so I was like, I can handle this. And I remembered it the whole way through. So the day after that VOD show, she was performing it and I played drums on it, and it was like exhilarating to be able to play drums again, but also to play drums behind my daughter, who was
Yeah,
like
that's got to be cool.
the singer of the band. It was
Yeah,
awesome.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
John, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. It was an awesome conversation. Anything you want to end off with?
No, man, Chris, this is amazing. Any excuse to talk hardcore, I will jump at in a heartbeat. So thank you for giving me that chance.
Of course, man. Much appreciated. Hang here. I'm just going to end this off, okay? Thank you for listening to the What Lies Ahead podcast, which is available on all streaming platforms. Go save the What Lies Ahead podcast playlist on Spotify that features all bands that were on the show. For more information on future episodes, you can go to my Instagram account and follow at What Lies Ahead _podcast and on Facebook by searching What Lies Ahead podcast. See you on the next episode.